And welcome to the Gersson Rosas podcast. My name's Sean, and joining me, as always, is the one and only Dante Bock, Mr. Bockman, man. How are we?
I'm better than a GM, an ex-GM to be named. That's how I am, Sean. How are you?
I'm good. Well, you're probably better than a current GM as well, because that's the two things we're going to talk about today. And it's weird because we're just around the corner from training camp. You know, a lot of major decisions have been made by these said gentlemen that we're going to talk about, and all of a sudden they're just fucking, one of them's out, one of them's on the way out of their team. I mean, looks like David Griffin's probably going to be staying just because of, you can read my article on Fire David Griffin. He's quite entitled. But yeah, where do you want to start? You want to start with the Timberwolves?
Yeah, let's start with the Timberwolves. This is crazy. This is crazy.
Look, it was the right move to make, maybe, but the timing is awful. So this just came from Wolves PR. Like, it wasn't even leaked. It just came in a press release. And like, can you imagine just being one of these like NBA journos who's just like, oh, an email from Wolves PR? Like, what is it? Jordan McLaughlin just like has a 3-point shot now. But no, it was that the Minnesota Timberwolves have parted ways, obviously, because he is the hue of his skin. He has been parted ways with Gersson Rosas, the general manager of the team, and Sachin Gupta will take over immediately on an interim basis as the head decision maker for the Minnesota Timberwolves. Now, the first thing I think of and I thought of when I saw this news this morning was, you've just given Rosas a full off season of, autonomy to do what he wants with the basketball team, with like multi-million-dollar decisions. And there's been subsequent reporting, which we're going to talk about how this is sort of a long time coming, toxic culture, relationship issues amongst the front office. And it's not like he just did something right then and there. Okay, we have to fire him. This was slowly building. And in the slowly building process, what made you want to do it so badly now after he's already made these decisions, as opposed to 2 months ago before? Like, yes, obviously he didn't draft anyone because he doesn't have a pick. The Golden State Warriors had it. But before he traded Wancho, before he traded Jarrett Culver and traded for Patrick Beverley, among other moves, what do you think?
Well, I think that you shouldn't look backwards when making these decisions. You should always look forwards. So if you decide that he's not the right person for the job, you should just make that move, because if you keep him around or wait for a better time or whatever, like, then you're into the season, you're into training camp, and it's like, well, now it's a worse time and you don't want to lose this season. It's crucial for everyone involved with the team that this season is better. And firing him halfway through the season, or, we'd be having the same conversation like, why the bad timing if they did it 10 games into the season? So it's not good timing now, like from the present day onwards. There was good timing, 2 months ago when is the off season, because it's not like they didn't know that the team had been shit. It's not like they didn't know that he had been the gentleman in charge of making all of the moves. And the dual reporting of an inappropriate relationship, which we'll get into.
An inappropriate consensual relationship, which we'll get into.
An inappropriate relationship, which we'll get into, and a toxic workplace culture. Those are two things that wouldn't have sprung up overnight. That would have been building for, he's been there for like 2+ years. He's had 2 full seasons there. So those are things that would have been very obvious. So why you would not fire him why you'd fire him in September as opposed to July, I don't know. If I was putting on my gossip conspiracy hat, I would say that the reporting around the inappropriate consensual relationship, which John Krasinski from The Athletic reported was a consensual sexual relationship with a female member of the organization. Gersson Rosas is married, by the way. I would suspect that maybe that could be the catalyst here, that something's gone on there, and they're like, look, this guy's not that good, and he's instituted a toxic workplace culture, and now he fucked the secretary on the desk. We got to get rid of this guy.
So like the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah, I think the straw that broke the camel's back, because otherwise it's like there's nothing that would cause. It's not like Glenn Taylor, the owner, would have just woken up one day and been like, like, I'm not okay with this toxic workplace culture. And you know that he is, because he's an old white businessman. So as long as the team's getting results, he doesn't care about a toxic workplace culture.
Well, I mean, a lot of assuming, but you're probably right. But that's something I also wanted to bring up there with the owner Glenn Taylor, because obviously he sold the team in the past half a year, and he sold it to, I think it was Mark Law and Alex Rodriguez. So there's two people buying both Minnesota Timberwolves and the Lynx, the WNBA team. And so this is like that they were doing, I think it was a year and a half or a 2-year transition process, and it all seems incredibly awkward. Like, I've read a couple of John Krasinski's articles in the past year, and it just sounds like, yeah, it just sounds kind of weird. Like Glenn Taylor's like walking around saying, "This is my dude, this is my dude," and Glenn Taylor had these quotes where he's like, "I've brought these people in, and these are good people. I want them to stay." And it's like, well, you're having your cake and eating it too. You're just going to keep all your people, and then this awkward new ownership is just going to not imprint their, just their what their personnel on the team. But this is good timing in terms of the transition, because Glenn Taylor has been the face of this firing, sort of this parting ways. So people can look at it and say, okay, Glenn Taylor said that we want to get rid of him because we want to move forwards. Glenn Taylor said this. Glenn Taylor said bring in Sachin Gupta. So now Glenn Taylor cops the brunt on the way out, and it's hardly a big brunt, but at least the thing is on Glenn Taylor's resume, so that when Mark Law and Alex Rodriguez come in, they've essentially got a clean slate, even though I'm 100% sure they had something to do with this, because this is their team moving forwards, and this is their decision to make for the future of their basketball franchise. So I like that point of view. Do you want to talk a little bit about the Gupta assigning?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't really know who he is, other than that he has a bit of a reputation as being what Rosas was a few years ago, which is like something of like a Maury Sam Hinkie tree whiz kid, whiz late 30-year-old.
With like early onset balding kid.
Yeah, well, they've got two balding. They've swapped balding men for each other, which is, if that's not indicative of like the NBA's managerial culture, then I don't know what is.
Well, it makes you good at maths. That's been proven.
So yeah, so have you heard much about this guy like previously? Is he on your radar? Because he's pretty much in the shadows for me.
So he's on my radar. Now I'm going to sound like a bit of a twat, but obviously reading the Tanking This to the Top book by
Yaron
Weitzman. So he wrote a lot about Sachin Gupta, and Gupta was someone who Sam Hinkie brought in when he took over the 76ers. And obviously there was the whole issues with that 76ers front office. So Sam Hinkie came in and he brought in Sachin Gupta as his second-hand man. And then pretty much what happened was he was the assistant to the general manager, but Hinkie would be the whole war room of decision making, and Hinkie would be in his personal office with Gupta while everyone else is outside, and he would just completely like separate him and Gupta from the rest of the front office and say, hey, can you get these scouting reports on like 50 dudes? All right, I'll talk to you later. And the rest of the front office just had no input whatsoever. It was literally just Gupta and Hinkie. They were the two people making all the decisions, the two people who knew everything, because the whole thing with Hinkie is that you didn't want to trust everyone because information is power. If you told someone something, maybe they're going to leak it to the media, or maybe they're going to tell their friend in another front office for whatever the reason may be. And he only trusted Gupta. And Gupta is another one of those maths whiz kids, like, yes, early 30s kids. And like I saw some really interesting thoughts on Twitter from both verified and non-verified people on Twitter. So take it with a grain of salt, or maybe take it a little bit heavier. But the thing is, he is the next whiz kid. And look, you talk about the Daryl Morey tree of general managers. They've all kind of fucked up apart from Daryl Morey. Like, this isn't Greg Popovich's coaching tree. Like, Daryl Morey's GMing tree isn't like the most lush. Could you agree on that?
Yeah, 100%. There's like littered with failure, and Rosas added to the pile.
But holy fuck, does it read well? And you and I sit here and go, oh, I mean, he was under Daryl Morey. So Gupta was under Daryl Morey, and then he was also like the guy to come with Hinkie to start this venture with the 76ers. Obviously, Rosas took the job in Minnesota. He came there. So some people were saying that maybe this immediate firing and hiring was also looking at the landscape, saying, okay, there's probably a few general managers that might not have, or president of basketball operations that might not have their jobs in the next 12 months. Cough, David Griffin, who we're going to talk about soon. And then as soon as those teams go, okay, we've just fired this dude, who's the next, young whiz kid? It's Gupta. So maybe the Timberwolves were like, okay, if we do this now, as opposed to firing Rosas, let's say you give Rosas 12 more months and say, hey, maybe make the playoffs with this roster. And if he fails, you could turn around. But then if he fails, you turn around and maybe Gupta is the GM for Cleveland or something. So it's like, maybe do it now. The timing is a little bit better here. Again, I probably would have preferred it 2 months ago, but just sort of bring in the guy that you might have even had a plan to bring him up eventually. And now you're a little bit worried that someone's going to poach him. But then again, like, fuck, what do we know about Daryl Morey's GMing tree so far? It hasn't proven all that well. And look, I don't see. Like, should we talk about the moves a little bit? Because I can't really say too much about Gupta. But what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, it's like it's terrible. Even if that was the case, though, what you just said, like they were like looking at Gupta and being like, this is the guy that we want to make sure stays in the organization, and if that means we have to make him the top dog, then we're gonna have to make him the top dog. They would have known that 2 months ago. It's not like he's new, and they're like, yeah, I don't know. It is organizationally like pretty bad because of, and we should talk about the moves because they've allowed Rosas to have a full off season of continuing to implement his plan, which thus far hasn't worked. So if you assume, as we probably both do, that it wasn't really going to work and that continuing along Rosas's pathway wasn't going to lead to much in the long term or the short term, then allowing him to do this and then bringing in Gupta and simultaneously depriving him of assets and opportunities to implement his vision, but also then making him have to invest organizational resources in like unpicking the seams that Rosas has sown. It's an organizational clusterfuck is what it is. But they haven't really done anything that major this offseason because one Golden State Warriors franchise had their first round pick.
Chestnut
7.
checkers.
That is light years if I've ever seen it. But like still imagine the groundwork that this bloke Gupta could have been doing if he was in 2.5 months ago instead of now, where it's like you're weeks away from training camp and you don't have any opportunity to do anything and you're literally just rolling in with Rosas's. It's a clusterfuck.
All right. So The Athletic did a really good job at just summing up Rosas' time as well. And I went on Instagram because there was a nice little graphic, so I can just read it for you from here. But on Instagram, the top comment on The Athletic's Instagram post is by a dude called millionaire_mentor00. And the comment is $5,000 for the first 20 people to DM me depressed. Anyway, so the notable transactions in Rosas' time was he obviously traded the 11th pick in the 2019 draft to your Phoenix Suns for Dario Saric and the 6th pick, selecting Jarrett Culver. He traded Robert Covington for Malik Beasley, Juan Hernan Gomez, Jared Vanderbilt, and a 2020 first-round pick, which ended up becoming Alexei Pokusevsky. And then, of course, he traded Andrew Wiggins and their 2021 first-round pick and 2021 second-round pick, who became Miles McBride, for D'Angelo Russell, Jacob Evans, and Amari Spellman. I still think this league has room for Amari Spellman. And then, obviously, he drafted Anthony Edwards first overall after taking quite a leap up to the number one pick. Not the best resume.
No, not the best resume at all. And they've got good players on their team, obviously. Like Cat is obviously a superstar. Edwards, he could go either way. You could see him becoming, that if it clicks, you could see him becoming like, fucking Dwayne Wade or something. If it doesn't, well, we'll see what we have.
Monte.
D'Angelo Russell is a good basketball player. He's just not a good basketball player for the contract and the role that they have. Malik Beasley is stick value if he can stay on the court through injury and suspensions. So there's assets here, and there's always been assets here. And I think in looking at the summation of what Rosas has done, yes, there's been challenges for the team. Ryan Saunders being a shit coach was a large challenge that he acted upon by firing Chris Finch, but he was the one that decided to give Ryan Saunders a season and a half anyway. So it's not like, oh, Ryan Saunders was really bad. He wanted to like see how it went and then make a move, right? You're the head honcho. So the decision to keep him in place, even though you were probably pretty sure that he's bad, reflects poorly. And yes, there was, Cat injury issues and Beasley missed time with suspension and D'Lo missed time with injuries, but what team hasn't had over the last, 18 months, and even in a regular season, doesn't have like, terrible things happen on a regular basis. Maybe not terrible, like on the order of magnitude of Cat's personal experiences, but teams deal with ups
Gun
and
to his
downs.
head, would it
Teams
be terrible?
teams deal with ups and downs all the time, and they don't like, churn out shit season after shit season with very little signs of progress. So I think if maybe Rosas feels like he's been hard done by, but I think like assessing the direction of the franchise managerially and then on the court, like no one's expecting this team to even compete for a play-in spot. And if you can't even be in
Fucking
the
10th seed.
vicinity of the 10th seed, it's not even that you have to be 10th. It's just like, could you be 12th and like 3 games behind 10th? If that's not even realistic, then you're a fucking shit team. And the fact that he's had so much like top level talent come through and has mismanaged resources and assets so badly to the point where they would tank if they could, but they can't tank because they had no fucking draft picks. He's done a really shit job. And I think that, aside from the fact that he was having an extramarital affair with a person inside the organization, which obviously everybody knew about, which, that just sounds like a bad idea. If I was going to have an extramarital affair with someone inside the organization, I would try my best to make sure people didn't know about it. But obviously he didn't get the memo. I think that he probably deserved to be fired.
All right.
Or parted ways with.
We were over the moon when we first heard that the NBA was going to be televised on Australian free-to-air TV in the 2019-20 season. It didn't exactly go swimmingly with the Nazi cough halting the season and games getting cancelled left, right, and centre, but it was a huge step and an exciting one for basketball fans all across the country.
Better yet, it wasn't a commercial channel cashing in on some basketball nerds like us. It was SBS, one of our public broadcasters. Unfortunately, the NBA wasn't the only thing SBS was pushing last season. They also ran advertisements from Sportsbet, Ladbrokes, Bet365, BetEasy, and Neds, some of the biggest sports betting companies in Australia.
In a one step forwards, 2 steps backwards move, SBS has dropped the ball here. As a public broadcaster, SBS plays a key role in providing relevant, culturally appropriate health information to local communities. The last thing SBS should be doing is offering a platform for gambling companies during the most financially unstable time in recent memory.
This past year, men aged 18 to 24 made up 79% of new gambling account holders, with increased median spending and frequency of bets. This is the last thing we should be spending our money on given the financial uncertainty that comes with the pandemic. During COVID lockdowns, wagering companies spent more money on advertising and incentives to gamble, and it worked. SBS needs to hear from viewers that gambling ad revenue isn't worth the harm it causes. Call on the SBS chair, George Savitas, to put community health ahead of gambling revenue by signing the petition at www.endgamblingAds.org.au/get-gambling-off-SBS with hyphens in between.
So that will be all for the Minnesota Timberwolves. Now, obviously, something that Sachin Gupta has in common with someone across the world is Michael Voss. 2 of them have both been given head decision-making jobs, and Michael Voss, the segue here, is someone who also looks a lot like Michael Voss, is David Griffin. Is that a good segue?
I was wondering how you're going to bring it back in. Do they look alike? I feel like Michael Voss has a much fuller head of hair than David Griffin.
But they're both gingers. They both could have a goatee. One of them decides to, the other one doesn't. They're both like they're either burly or the decision to not be burly. Like
Michael Voss has an extremely distinguished professional athletics career.
Yeah, but like career. I reckon if you chuck David Griffin in the gym like 6 days a week, like he's got the build. You reckon?
Yeah, he's a big boy. He could definitely get into. But I mean, Michael Voss is not like carrying around like a shredded body. Like Michael Voss is carrying around a body like if you got Michael Voss in the gym. Maybe if you got Griff in the gym 6 days a week, he could become Voss. And if you got Voss in the gym 6 days a week, he could become shredded.
He could become Simon Black.
Michael Voss is just
Michael Voss. He's at the body shape where, hey, like you're in this crowded room and like, oh God, can you give me a hand with this? He'll jump down on his hands and knees and give you a hand with the heavy thing. And he could back up a truck and no one would ask any questions.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, on an AFL related note, Michael Voss obviously just been announced as the new Carlton head coach. I wish Michael Voss every success. As a diehard Brisbane Lions fan, I wish Michael Voss every success. Didn't quite work out for him on his first go around, but he's one of these guys who has, had an experience, negative experience, taken his lumps, gone on and just decided to try and learn from some of the
Student of the
greats.
game.
Student of the game. He's like Dimmer. Please teach
Wow.
me what you know. He's like Ken Hinkley. Please teach me what you know. And then he's just like learning at the, not that Ken Hinkley's some like master of the game, but he's learning at the knee of some learned people. And I wish him every success. I really do.
For our American listeners, Carlton Football Club is essentially the New York Knicks, and Michael Voss is David Fizdale getting hired on day one. So you're optimistic, but it's the Knicks. So, they just churn through coaches. Is that a good comp?
For data.
All right. So this news coming from Christian Clark of the New Orleans Times-Picayune. Now, obviously, we don't get news from there often, but how good. I also have a copy of the Times-Pic in my bedroom because I bought one when I was in New Orleans. But the report is that David Griffin is struggling in New Orleans. That is a headline and a half.
Are they struggling with him, or is he struggling with them? Or is it a mutual struggle fest? It's a simple struggle.
A parted ways struggle. I would have gone with the title Fire David Griffin. Now, obviously, if you do want to read an article with the title Fire David Griffin, you can go to thedeep2.com. I cannot believe it's that easy. But this article just sort of details everything we've already known and we've already like half confirmed, but haven't really confirmed. And now it's out there, and it's out there just in time for training camp. And it's so icky, and I love it because I do not like David Griffin, and I don't think he should be holding a job. So a lot of the animosity between David Griffin and the team is that is the way that he handled Zion Williamson's return from meniscus surgery as a rookie. We all remember the game that Zion came back against the San Antonio Spurs and hit 4 threes in a quarter. That was amazing. Zion thinks he should have came back about 50 games earlier. Obviously, they were playing things extremely cautious, but that was just a really rough start to start the season. Then obviously they went into the bubble. Hard to play basketball in the bubble, and David Griffin was trying to keep up that relationship. And according to this report, he was texting him daily. And in the bubble, I'll actually read this quote. It says, "The relationship between Williamson and David Griffin had also begun to sour during his rookie season. Griffin tried hard to forge a bond, but they communicated infrequently now. While the Pelicans are in the bubble, Griffin asked to meet with Williamson and played the piano for him." Dante, what comes to your mind when you hear that paragraph?
I'm thinking of like Griff, like in like the, like a black tuxedo with like a bow tie and like a really expensive hotel lobby.
Yeah.
Wearing like some white gloves, playing the piano. Just like if my boss was texting me every day, I'd like, what are you fucking doing?
You'd feel ick, man.
Why are you messaging me? And you've seen the way that like some American sports stars text when they like share screenshots. It's like, like hope the family's well. Yes, sir. You too. Keep grinding. Always give it 100%. And we don't need this every day. We do not need this every day. I think especially someone who has a bit of a reputation for maybe not treating people the best. I don't know whether Zion is an intuitive person or not, whether he kind of like figured out pretty quickly that maybe Griff is a bit of a snake oil merchant. But let's just say hypothetically that he did. Then it's like double bad because he's there being like, I'm not this guy's biggest fan. And now he's trying
not to your brother, you goose.
Not your brother, you goose. It's the way you live your life, scumbag. Anyway, for our American listeners, don't worry about it. But now it's like this guy who he's not really vibing with is trying really hard to like be friends with him, and it just becomes even more transparent. And when there's someone that you don't like, and that they know that you don't like them, but they want to change it, and so they're like, "Oh, Sean, like, hi, how's it going?" They're trying to be like really nice to you, and you're like, "Look,
you see right through it,
Alan. I don't want anything to do
Alan."
with you.
Who the fuck is Alan?
Well, I'm just thinking about, a name, start at the start of the alphabet. Probably would have gone with Aaron if I was right at the start, but Um, yeah, I think the book on Griff is maybe out a little bit. And I want to give us a bit of a pat on the back because I feel like we've been pretty at the forefront of this charge in the basketball news media world because we've been, calling this bloke out for pretty much his entire Pelicans tenure. Very consistently. And I feel like maybe the rest of the basketball commentary have only been applying these principles to the Griff situation sporadically. So I feel like we deserve a bit of a pat on the back.
Yeah, thank you, Dante, and you do deserve a pat on the back. Let's just have a little circle jerk for a moment. But when I imagine David Griffin playing the piano for Zion Williamson, I'm like, does he play like Still Dre? Like, does he just like, I could just imagine David Griffin, Michael Voss build hunched over a piano in like the middle of like Berkeley Square in Brunswick, just like start tapping those, whatever, just the intro to Still Dre, and then just looking at him like, does anyone know what I'm playing? So, Dr. Dre. And it's just, it really hurts me. And just like when you were saying that, imagine if your boss texts you every day, it's like, no one needs that unless like, you work for like the social media for a team, then maybe you should probably
unless
texting
it's like
every day.
Unless it's like genuine and it's like, he saw this meme, thought of you, and it's like, there you go. Then all the Zion has to reply is like,
haha,
funny meme, like it's a good one.
And then you go on Zion's phone and it's all like, you can't view this story because it's from a blocked account. It is because it's not an industry where you need to text every day and just hang out. It's anyway.
No, well, and especially like maybe there's more of an argument for the coach doing it. Although I can imagine how Zion would probably respond if Stan Van Gundy was texting him every day as well. But
Stan Van Gundy wrote Still Dre.
Honestly, after protests in Melbourne and the earthquake, nothing would shock me, not even that. So there was a report. There's a nice little nugget in this report from Christian Clark at the Times-Picayune, which dates back to April 2020 when The Last Dance was airing, and that some people in the organization began to refer to Griffin as Griff Krause, which is not a particularly inventive nickname at all.
Doesn't roll off the tongue.
Doesn't really roll off the tongue at all. But obviously the comparison to Jerry Krause being made directly to your general manager is a pretty good indication of the esteem that they held him in. And that dates to 6 months ago. 18 months ago. So these are obviously like pretty long running issues. And 18 months ago, how long had he been there? Like less than a year. So he's not really wasted any time in getting everyone inside the organization to fucking hate him, which is honestly a bit of that's a hard thing to do. Although maybe not for someone with the demonstrated history of entitlement that you have exposed previously.
Thank you, Dante, again. But so with the Griff Krause, now obviously this was a group text, and I imagine the group text is between the players. Maybe they text every day, maybe they don't. What do you think Steven Adams' role was in referring to him as Griff Krause? Because I think Steven Adams has the humor that would just call him Jerry Krause and just liken him directly to Jerry Krause. And like, do you reckon, like, which player in this text thread, Eric Bledsoe, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Zion Williamson, which player first said it, do you reckon?
I think Adams is a good shout because I can't quite tell if he's like Mr. Nice Guy or he's got that like tell it how it is like ruffian kind of sense of humor. Eric Bledsoe gives me like insidious locker room vibes rather than like just saying what he thinks. He's kind of like he's like a little rat sneaking around, like whispering in people's ears, being like Griff Krause. I don't know. I think Adams is a good shout. But I mean, like, what if it was like Ingram or Zion? And it's like it starts right at the top. And it's like if you got one of the best two players on your team not even really respecting you, that's a problem. And I guess it's just like I think there more broadly has been a shift in the role of the general manager to being more involved with the team than someone like what we saw Jerry Krause, who, you know, his offices are on a different floor in the building. He doesn't necessarily have that much to do with the team. Communicates with the team via the coach often. Like there's kind of a more holistic movement with general managers becoming part of the team. But like the general manager doesn't need to be part of the team to the point that he's texting the players. Like Dennis Lindsay, you know, I think is maybe no longer the head decision maker in Utah, but someone like him, you can't imagine him being like there every day, like chatting with everyone, like, you know, like that on the reg, like having conversations, trying to be their friend. Like you're the GM, be the GM. You don't need to.
Rudy Gobert doesn't have friends as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, he doesn't have friends anymore. You know what I mean, though? Like, well,
yeah, definitely.
Friends in Utah anymore. Like him and Donovan Mitchell are mortal enemies.
I was scrolling through our Instagram feed, the Deep 2 at Instagram. I don't know, whatever. And one of the things that I wrote was a report from whoever it was, like ESPN. And it said that the relationship between Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert is like unsalvageable and they will never be friends again. And then I was just looking at it, I'm like, fuck, they played a full season together and like had a playoff run. So like,
yeah, but maybe they're not. Maybe they're not hitting up all the best like Mormon restaurants in. I don't know why I said Mormon restaurants. They're all Mormon restaurants in Salt Lake City. But yeah, they're not taking like road trips to Provo together. But you know, you don't need to be best mates to throw a lob to someone.
Yeah, that's true. Just take us for example.
Yeah, well, exactly.
I slam him down. And I just want to add on this Griff Krause thing. This, if it is Williamson or Ingram that came up with this, it's actually like a really nice, like not even cocky, just a nice humble brag, because the argument for Jerry Krause is that, you know, MJ fell into his lap and he did a good job at drafting good players. And then like he made a couple of shrewd moves. So if you're saying that your general manager is like Jerry Krause, obviously there's all the negative connotations. But if you're the player that plays for Jerry Krause, you're probably a good player because Jerry Krause did a good job at drafting players. So like Zion's sitting there like, oh, you know, he's like Jerry Krause. Like, oh, he's such a prick, but God, he drafts well. Who did he pick first in 2019? Like, I actually don't mind that both ways. And then I just imagine again Steven Adams saying exactly what I just said to Zion, being like, fuck, you know, like use it as a compliment, man. Like, keep going.
Yeah, I mean that's a pretty unique way of spinning that. Yeah, this is another one where, you know, obviously again we have been saying for quite a while that he should not be in charge, but it seems like that's where it's heading. So this is another one that potentially is going to have pretty terrible timing because, you know, if this report's coming out now, obviously where there's smoke, there's fire, especially, you know, coming from the Times-Picayune, which is the local paper in New Orleans. It's not like it's ESPN reporting and, you know, like this guy, you know, Christian Clark, the intrepid Christian Clark is probably around the team quite often, especially in the lead up to the start of the season. So I think it's safe to assume that there is fire with this smoke. But then it's like, well, what are you doing? This is another bloke who you just let run the whole off season, and what, you're going to fire him a month before the season starts, or you're going to fire him 10 games into the season, or alternatively, all of these issues exist with him not only as a GM in the role, but also as a person, and the insinuated organizational issues that he creates. We've discussed him potentially not being the nicest person, potentially not instilling like a great organizational culture. So if all those things exist and then you go through the first 15 games and you're 10-5, does that just go away? And then you just, you know, you just keep him around until, you know, enjoying your moderate success until the toxicity of the organization becomes so much that you can't bear it, and then you have to fire him and you just wasted a year, you know, 6 months, a year, 18 months, 2 years. Like, if you're not getting the results and the person is, you know, not a good figurehead for your organization, why would you let him not only run the fucking off season, but hire a coach? He hired the coach. And so what, are you going to fire him now and bring in a new GM who's like, oh, well, we haven't hired this coach. I didn't hire this coach. I'm not, you know, that immediately puts the coach on the hot seat.
But also, like I wrote about in the article, like every single time David Griffin fixes up one of these mistakes with these picks that he inherited through the Drew Holiday trade and the Anthony Davis trade, every time he fixes up one of his problems, like a Steven Adams deal, and gives up stuff to let them go, that's a tool that your next general manager who's going to come in and fix this situation won't have in their arsenal. If you had fired David Griffin 12 months from now, they would come in and still have that pick, and like maybe they still have Lonzo, and they kept that pick that they traded to the Hornets and the sign and trade for Devontae. That's not there anymore. It's like you're just hindering the next person to come in. And has David Griffin had consensual intercourse with one of his staffers?
Well, I don't know if that's been reported yet, but I mean, like, would you be surprised?
Yeah.
Not to wildly speculate, but I don't know what Griff's marital status is, which is obviously
he's married. Because I did my research when I was writing the article. I'm just thinking two things right now. First of all, like, he had testicular cancer and stuff, so like, you know, you can make a horrible joke if you're that way inclined. And then secondly, I just, like, as I was saying in the group chat before, because the FIBA Women's World Cup is in 2022. Obviously, I'm applying for some FIBA credentials at the moment. Just like, give it a shot. And if they just happen to wander over the most recent episode of the Deep Down Bear podcast, they'll hear us just pontificating about David Griffin's sex life in the front office. So, like,
well, you know what? Someone has to pontificate about it, and I say, why not us? FIBA officials, if you're listening, this is a representation of our podcast.
We don't usually do this. It's just a week away from training camp, and we're filling content in. So excited for the World Cup. Sydney.
Yeah, it's dope that it's going to be in Sydney. We're definitely going to get a little crew together and make an appearance, I think.
Just like when we went to Illawarra to watch LaMelo Ball.
Yeah, exactly. That was sick. Remember that? That was amazing.
Nah, but to be fair, he got injured before Melbourne could play in Ill, because I wanted to go to Illawarra and just say, like, what the fuck is here? Still don't know. Never will find out.
Well, we could always just go to Illawarra, but there's less of a pool. Maybe in 2024 when Javonte Graham, and that sounds awfully like Devontae Graham for a made-up name. When Alan Smith, the next big, like, US high school star, he plays for Illawarra, we can make the little road trip. I'm sure there was a reason why I didn't go. Maybe I was living in Perth, potentially.
Maybe it was
no, it would have been before.
It was before then, because LaMelo had the first
would have been around the 2019-2020 summer.
LaMelo playing in Melbourne and Sydney both had record. No, it was just Sydney. He didn't play in Melbourne. It was the record crowd for an NBL game when LaMelo went to Sydney, played Andrew Bogut.
Yeah. He's like, wow, so this is what 9,000 people looks like.
Well, I went to a playoff game that season where it was Melbourne versus Sydney, and I just love saying go hard or go to Sydney. And it was game 2 because they do best of 3. And Andrew, I was like, oh my God, my first time seeing Andrew Bogut in person. Like, last time I tried to see him was like 2014 when my friend Angus and I lined up outside Foot Locker in Melbourne for 2 hours just for him to close up shop and not actually see us because we were too late. That's a story for another podcast. But yeah, I was like, oh, I get to see Andrew Bogut. Like, you know, obviously he's like 30 million years old, but, you know, like he just won the MVP, won Defensive Player of the Year, his first team All NBL. And he ended the fucking game with 0 points and 3 rebounds or something. It was 0 points and like single digit rebounds. And Melbourne had blown the game out of the water like before halftime. And he just sat for the second half.
What was his box score for slurs and conspiracy theories? Probably pretty high.
Yeah, no, probably pretty high, but they all seem to rush in after he was looking for gainful employment as a basketball player. Funny, it's crazy how that works.
Yeah, that is crazy. Well, he's obviously found gainful employment with Channel 7 as a basketball commentator.
Oh yeah.
After what we listened to during the Olympics when we couldn't get the kindly old American grandpa man.
I actually never heard Andrew Bogut or Gay speak. I was always grandpa man, or there was like some Eastern European lady that was doing all the games as well. It was kind old man by himself.
I never got the Eastern European lady. My alternate crew was Andrew Gaze and Andrew Bogut. The Drews, which is just I need less of in my life.
The Drew
less
crew.
Of both of them individually and both of them together. I don't need to be watching the footy and then in the fourth quarter see an ad for the bounce with Andrew Gaze just trying to be funny. And I don't need him there.
Andrew
Keep him away
Gay's in
from
a
me.
suit with the shittest fucking shoes on, with the shittest sneakers.
Yeah.
Let's actually, going back to that FIBA accreditation. Let's not slag off commentators who work for FIBA. The Drew Crew.
We can slag off Andrew Berger. Andrew Berger deserves to be slagged off.
The Drew Crew is another famous quote that David Griffin probably said while playing Still Dre to Zion Williamson in the bubble. Well,
that would be very Griff in character.
Oh, I thought you were making a play on Grim. Is that the natural conclusion to this episode?
I think you're a bit premature there, because I just wanted to give a quick plug to the Jeff Van Gundy NBA tribute show co-host and Deep 2 contributor Lucas Petridis wrote a wonderful article called "A Decade of Limbo is Over," and it's about the Washington Wizards, and it's kind of like how the hell did we get here to a place that maybe resembles optimism? New coach, lots of young talent. Westbrook is gone. So check that out. That's up now on thedeep2.com. Can't believe it's that simple. And you can also access it on Instagram through the link in our bio, and then obviously on Facebook as well, where we've shared it around. So that was a really good article. And obviously, if you've been reading our stuff and reading Lucas's stuff, you know that he brings a signature flavor and a signature flair, which is always a lot of fun. And this one doesn't disappoint on that front. So I think now that is the natural conclusion to this podcast.
Beautiful. So as Dante said, check out the article on thedeep2.com or follow any of our socials. I'm sure you can find them. You listen to this, you found this podcast, you're smart enough to do it. Dante, I will speak to you next time.
See you, Sean.